We're all aware that Black Ops 6 is an absolutely beautiful game in terms of graphics, art style, especially if you turn on ray tracing, especially, you know, when you're playing a map like Skyline, the lighting's going crazy. Black Ops 6 is a beautiful game. So I decided, hey, what would happen if I took Black Ops 6 and tried to make it look like Black Ops 3 on the Xbox 360? I have a pretty capable PC, but you know what? Why push my PC, my CPU, my graphics card, and all that to the limits? Why not just go ahead and, you know, let it relax for the day? In terms of the resolution, we're gonna leave it at 1080p just so then it's easier for me to edit because, you know, if I try to turn down the resolution, then when I go to try to edit it, it's gonna be in a little box up at the corner, and plus it would just make it a blurry mess and possibly make it sickening to watch for some people. So we're gonna leave the resolution at 1080p. We're not gonna be messing around with any FSR or DLSS. We want this to be as native and as true and as disgusting as possible. The VRAM, you know, all that, whatever. But in terms of everything else, we have everything on the absolute lowest settings, which means that for some settings, it's just gonna be off completely. So like we're going as low as we can, but if the ability to turn something off is there, then we completely turned it off. Very low and everything, minimal on the texture streaming, like straight up everything. There's a lot of things that are straight up off here. And then in terms of the view, I do have the FOV at 120 just because I'm playing on PC. When I play on console, I like to leave it at just like, you know, the standard 80 just because when you're playing on a TV at a distance, you don't want the FOV that high, or at least for me, I don't, just because like it makes it harder for me to see things, so I just played that default FOV that you would have seen back on like even like Black Ops 2 back in the day. That being said, again, when I'm on PC and my face is right up against the monitor, I don't exactly want to be motion sick, so I turn up the FOV just because, again, also my desk is really short, so I kind of have to turn it up because my face is even closer than most people's normally would be to their monitor. And then in terms of everything else, we have motion blur off, and I always just have my camera movement at least. I just, you know, I don't need all that extra camera movement. You know, when it's on least, that feels just right. There's just enough camera movement, but it's not like, you know, super crazy. Outside of that, yeah, let's go ahead and, well, you know, I mean, just looking at the menu, like, it's one of those situations where it really doesn't look that bad at first glance. And I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and be dramatic and hype it up for the camera and be like, oh, this is like Black Ops 3 on last gen, because it's really not that bad. It's just one of those things where when you take the time to look very closely at certain things, it's like, all right, these kind of look like PS1 textures. First, we'll go ahead and dive into a match of Face Off just so we can kind of get some of that fast-paced action, just kind of get a look at everything, and then after that, we'll also dive into Core and get a look at some of those maps as well. But again, on the surface, it's really not that bad. Like, you look at her face, and I mean, you know, this woman is beautiful as ever. The animations and textures on the weapon look good for the most part. You know, there's some lower res stuff here, but it's mainly just like on her chest piece there, where you really see, like, you can literally see the pixels. Again, I'm not the type of guy to hype stuff up for the camera. I can't stand when YouTubers do that. I'm just gonna be like, yeah, I'm not gonna be like Digital Foundrying this thing, but we're just gonna look at it, see how it plays, and this is mainly just for people with lower end PCs out there that really can't run this game at anything above low, just so that you know what you're getting yourself into if you do decide to play Black Ops 6 on PC, but you can't necessarily crank up the graphics to go with ray tracing and everything like that. Now, it is worth noting that you are not going to be seeing crazy shrieks in this video just because I'm playing on KBAM, and I suck at KBAM. This is just that I play my games like this way, like maybe 1% of the time. 99% of the time I'm playing on controller, on console, just because that's my preferred way to play, but we'll just go ahead and kind of at least take a look around the map. As you can see, you know, like some of the low-res stuff does kind of stick out like a sore thumb, like when you're looking at this. But again, even from a distance, like it really doesn't look that bad. It's only when you get up really close to try to look at it where it's like, all right, yeah, this kind of looks like something from the PS2. Not dissing the PS2, of course, because that is the main generation that I grew up during. And I mean, I still go back and play like PS2 and Atari games all the time. So yeah, I mean, you know, you guys know me. I don't care about graphics literally at all, but you know, when you're comparing this to how the game could look, yeah, there is a difference. Now, I would like to get a really nice comparison shot and crank up the graphics for you guys and then kind of go back and forth with that. The only issue is when you change some of the graphics, sometimes it forces you to restart the game, and that also means once you restart the game, you're gonna have to like recompile your shaders and stuff, and doing that on PC takes a long, like way longer than it should sometimes. So we aren't necessarily gonna do all that. Maybe at the end, if I can find some settings that don't necessarily need me to restart the game in order for them to take effect, we can do that. But otherwise, yeah, again, we're just gonna take a little look, stroll around the map just so you guys can kind of get a feel for things. And again, you know, it's really not that bad. It's not like Black Ops 3 on last gen by any means. That being said, this is a really dark map, so I'm going to be interested to see what a really bright and vibrant map, like, say, Skyline or even, like, Rewind is going to look like. Like, how much of the low-resolution texture is going to point out there? What about some of the text on the, you know, like, the sides in Rewind, for example? One thing I will say is that it's really hard to explain. It's not that the lower graphics necessarily affect the visibility of enemies, but I do kind of feel myself kind of having to squint a little bit more, kind of like be like, oh wait, is that an enemy like right there? If I would have been playing, say, on like Xbox or PS5 right there, I easily would have seen that enemy because I've been in that scenario plenty of times. But here on PC with the graphics cranked down so low that, like, even right there, I was kind of like, oh wait, yeah, that is an enemy moving past right there. And it's just because the graphics are set to such a low setting to where the pixels are literally kind of like mashing together. Even though we're still at the native 1080p resolution of my monitor, everything else around it is still at a much lower resolution. So, you know, sometimes some things are kind of like blending together. So that is one thing worth keeping in mind. You know, if you do get on PC and you turn this thing down way down to the lowest graphics settings, there is a chance that you won't be as competitively, I don't know, able as some of the other players in the game. But at the same time, this is Call of Duty multiplayer. You're probably just here for casual fun like I am, you know. Oh, wait, well, my aim was absolute doo-doo right there again. I never play on K-Band, but, you know, when I play Call of Duty, I do not care about being all crazy competitive and sweaty and stuff like that. I play Call of Duty for the casual fun, sometimes sweating if I feel like dropping a nuke, but that's very far and few between, you know. I just play Call of Duty for fun. I really can't stand the people that get on here trying to treat every match like they're trying to win $1 million in the CDL, but, you know, I went on that whole tangent plenty of times before. We won't go on it again, but again, you know, it's totally playable. It totally looks fine. It's really only when you slow down to look at the details. Like right here, the rocks in front of this guy, like, yeah, that's like something from the PS1. I mean, even here in the winter circle, it doesn't look too bad. Obviously, the faces don't have as much detail as they normally would, but I mean, like, honestly, everything still looks good. Like, the shadows still look good and everything. I feel like they should have some more settings, maybe to adjust for even lower end PCs. Like, if there was a way to turn off shadows completely, or to, like, crank down some of the, like, filterings of the textures and such even lower. I know completely turning off the shadows or turning them down even lower would make the game look even worse, really, because games, like, some people don't realize this, but the way that games look, like, a lot of it really does rely on the lighting and the shadows. Like, people don't realize just how important that stuff is. But again, if you were able to at least, like, turn those settings off, I feel like that would really help with making this game playable for even more players out there, because, you know, some people don't realize this, but there is people out there that are still rocking, like, RX 550s, or maybe something even older than that. And don't get me wrong, the RX 550 is capable of running games from even like the late 2010s, but nowadays, you know, there's some games where, you know, even if you crank the graphics all the way down to the lowest settings, you're gonna be lucky to even get like 30 FPS on that thing. And I mean, I'm not sure what the minimum requirements are for Black Ops 6 necessarily. I didn't look into all that. Maybe you could get this running on a 550 if you cranked everything down all the way, but I'd probably be expecting maybe 30 to 40 FPS at best on that card, but again, it's hard to say. Anyways, yeah, we're here on the map Babylon, and this is a pretty decent example of what you could expect. You know, it's a relatively well-lit map, and while you can see the shadows are definitely looking a bit blocky there, looking like some Minecraft blocks and pixels, if we're gonna be honest. You know, it's not the worst thing in the world. Again, it's definitely a bit flatter. Now, let me see. I want to know if I'm able to at least change some of the graphical settings without having to restart the game. Okay, now I changed two simple settings. I put the textures on medium, and I put the shadows on medium. And immediately, you can, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, you can tell a bit of a difference. Is it a massive difference? No, but when you look at the shadow work and just the textures overall, even changing those two settings to normal, like, yeah, you can tell a decent bit of a difference, but again, it's not gonna be anything game-breaking, so if you're on a lower end PC, if you're just barely scratching and meeting those Black Ops 6 requirements, just keep in mind, you know, if you do have to keep those settings all the way on the lowest and maybe even start adjusting the resolution, which honestly, if you're on a card like, say, an RX 550 2GB model, I would recommend putting this game all the way down to the lowest settings, cranking the resolution down to 720p. If you have to go lower than 720p, then I mean, you could still play the game, and, you know, I won't fault anybody for it. You know, I know what it's like to have a PC that's not exactly the most capable thing in the world, but still want to be playing games that are, you know, realistically speaking, above its pay grade or above what it's really able to do. So if you have to go sub 720p, I guess you could do that, you know, crank the settings down to low, and you could probably squeeze out a good 30 to 40 FPS out of this, which, you know, I've always said 30 FPS is a completely acceptable frame rate. There's no problem with 30 FPS. The only people that complain about that stuff are the no likes on Twitter and Reddit that don't even play video games anyway. I apologize for me dying so much in this video too. Like I said, I really suck at keyboard and mouse, so I'm just like, yeah, I'm trying, but it's not going good. I can't play games like this. Like, I can, but nowhere near as I would be on controller. And I know I can just hook up a controller, but, you know, I'm over here on the set. I don't feel like grabbing my controller right now. We're already here, and I have to flip through the menus a bunch of this video, which is admittedly easier to do on mouse when you're trying to go through all the settings. Anyways, let's go ahead and crank the settings all the way back down just so we can get that quick comparison. Spawning back in, again, like, once I switch it back to very low, which I know YouTube has all sorts of compression, so it might be a bit harder to see than it is in person. There is definitely a difference right off the rip, but, you know, could be a lot worse. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record in this video, just basically saying the same thing over and over again. Like, yeah, it's not as good as it could be, but it could be a lot worse. Da-da-da-da-da. Again, this is more or less just a video that I'm trying to make for people with, you know, lower NPCs, trying to see how the game looks. And also, I was just curious, you know, every time that I get a Call of Duty on PC, I'm always like, all right, what's this thing look like at the best settings? And then what's it look like at the worst? And I'm always surprised by just how good the game still looks at the worst graphic settings, which I really just feel like speaks more to the sheer quality of the graphics as well as the art style in these games, especially in something like Black Ops, which has always had a very strong art style in this sub-series of Call of Duty games. One thing I also wanted to mention is that a lot of the recent Call of Duties have recommended that you have a SSD for installing the game, but I purposely made sure to install this game on a hard disk drive, an HDD, just to see, like, okay, is it going to affect the performance of the game? And furthermore, I made sure that it was not the internal HDD that I have, because I have a main SSD that I use for, you know, storing all of my programs, booting up my stuff, as well as an internal HDD, which is like however many terabytes big that I use just for storing large video files, because obviously I'm a content creator, so I need a hard drive for all those big files, as well as an external hard drive for storing a couple of older games that don't necessarily need an SSD, along with secondary files that just, you know, just kind of like miscellaneous stuff. So I made sure to install this on my external hard drive, which means that in theory it should be even slower than the one inside of my PC. And as you can see, we have had no problem so far in the game when it comes to loading, playing. There hasn't been any stuttering. I haven't been at a severe disadvantage due to installing it on an HDD. So you could totally go that route and still be fine. Even though it says SSD on their thing, again, I haven't had any issues during this beta. Your mileage may vary when it comes to like playing the campaign or zombies, so don't completely take my word for it. Maybe see if there's some more tests done on that by the time that the full game releases, but at the very least, just during the beta, it has not affected anything at all. It's funny because you can tell during the loading screens that the graphic settings are clearly cranked up a little bit until you get into the game, but once again, getting into a map like Gala here, you know, again, some of the character models are a bit lower res. The environment itself, I can definitely tell, is just a bit flatter overall than what I've been playing, like on my PS5, for example. Overall, though, this definitely isn't no Black Ops 3 on last gen, so totally playable. Also, from the time that this video goes live, the beta is still going to be live for another, I'm trying to think about how many hours it is exactly, like 16, 17 hours, something like that. So if you wanted to, you could totally download the beta and, you know, give it a shot just to see, like, how your PC does with it. I know the first beta was a closed beta, which you either needed Game Pass Ultimate for, or you needed to like pre-order the game, but this beta is an open beta, which means that even if you haven't pre-ordered the game, even if you don't have Game Pass, literally anybody and everybody can install and try out the beta. So definitely give it a shot, see if your PC can at least handle this, and if it can, then you should be good to at least play the multiplayer when the full game releases. Can I at least get a few kills here on KBAM? Like, okay, there we go. There's a headshot right there. I can sleep tonight. You know, I've played, what, 3 or 4 matches in this video, and yet it still hasn't adjusted the SBMM to take it easy on me. I mean, clearly I'm struggling here. Clearly I can't play on KBAM. Activision, please take it easy on me and let me get a couple of kills. Hold up, wait. Are they listening to me? Okay, there we go. I got a kill and an assist. That's something. Well, I got 1 kill, but then the other guy just said no. Again, got a kill, but then they said no. I think my biggest issue with playing games on PC is just the fact that your movement is so restricted compared to any other control scheme, because on PC, you only have 8 directions of movement, whereas on controller, you have like a full 360 degrees, which I feel like in a shooter like Call of Duty is just, you know, important to have, specifically in Black Ops 6. In other, you know, first-person shooters, I can see the case of like, hey, usually you're just moving forward and then kind of moving with your looking around, you know, control scheme, whether that be with a right analog stick or a mouse, so that's different. But in Black Ops 6, when it's all about about moving in that full 360 directions with Omni movement. I don't know. Something about playing this game on K-Man specifically just feels wrong. I'm not saying it's objectively worse or bad by any means. It's just, it's not my preferred control scheme. Much more of a controller console guy. But anyways, yeah, this was Black Ops 6 at the worst graphic settings. Definitely not as bad as I thought it was going to be. In fact, it's actually surprisingly good. But anyways, yeah, that's where we're going to conclude things for today. From the time of recording this, it is Sunday morning, which means that you guys will be getting one more beta video from me because the beta will be leaving tomorrow, Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. So I'll be able to push out one more video in the beta, but unfortunately, that's going to be it until October 25th. And now I'm immediately depressed just by saying that. But anyway, as always, a massive shout out and thank you to all the patrons and channel members. Thank you to all of you in the low baller tier, and an even bigger shout out and thank you to all of you in the big baller tier, Mellow Asking and Big Daddy Manny. And the biggest shout out and thank you to all of you in the G tier, Ride Vengeance and Cheese Girl. Thank you guys so much. You guys are literal legends. I love you. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. Peace.